Good evening and welcome to another episode of Apolitically Incorrect Guyana. My name is KIAN Jabouur and as usual, I am your host this evening. Also, as usual, except for few and far between, I am joined by Mr. Timothy Jonas, somebody I know whose opinion we all love to hear and are always very educated when he speaks. So we're going to get into a few interesting, not a few, quite a bit of interesting topics here today. We're just running through the list. But before I get into that, I would like to just touch quickly on my previous episode, my previous show last week in which Mr. Jonas wasn't here. So
I heard you lit up the show.
I was loud, and it ruffled some feathers. All right, but what I'd like to say is I know a lot of people out there are not very fond of hearing that kind of conversation when it comes to the type of language and the way it's spoken. I've been doing this for a little while now. I've been in politics, I think since 2018 when we started this. We're now in 2024. I've been doing this for a while. And if there's one thing that I've learned about politics in Guyana, and I guess in general, is that different people respond to different things and in different ways. And I'm very cautious in understanding my audience and who I'm speaking to and when I'm speaking to them. I know that this show is a very general show. I know lots of people from all backgrounds are watching, but there are times that there are people out there that I think need to be spoken to on the basis of making sure that they feel safe, making sure that they know that somebody's actually willing to fight for them, making sure that they know that this is not just a top-heavy conversation where, things up there and these people up here need to be dealt with and these things need to change. I think people need to understand and know and feel, more importantly, that when the time comes and a minority government is created and there are multiple parties in parliament and we are all fighting for what's best for Guyanese, it's not just our Guyanese, it's all Guyanese. And I think that translates to people being confident that there is somebody out there that can't be bought by the PPP and is willing to say what they need to say, will not join the PNC in order to, stifle or hurt anybody else. Wrong is wrong, and that will be called out. I don't care what side of the fence you're on. I don't even care if it's on our side of the fence. Our party, as you guys know, ANUG, we have taken steps when we have had issues in which has been dealt with very publicly, and there is a right and there's a wrong. And if somebody's doing something wrong, I'm going to call it out. I don't care who you are. I don't care how powerful you think you are. At the end of the day, in this realm of politics, we are all here working for the people. All right? We are all here trying to do something that will benefit everyone. And I'm sorry, the conversation on the last show was about teachers. It was about, poor quality infrastructure work and so on. And I'm sorry, at some point in time, we have to understand that somebody has to be fighting for the people of the country. Somebody has to be willing to stand up there and call bullshit bullshit. Call a spade a spade. And every now and again, people might not like my tone when I do it, but the truth is, I want people out there to feel that we are going to fight for them. It's not just sitting down and, doing what PPP and PNC are doing and, holding hands and playing a game in front of the camera, but at the same time, behind doors, making sure that the whole country is divided and they maintain control. It's something that I want to say when we step in, that's not the game we're going to be playing. So it's kind of the reason I get to that stage. People need to know that we're fighting. So that's just as an update too. It did lead to the PPP, one of the PPP pages releasing a very old video of somebody that was speaking about me. I just like to clear up that all of my situations, any situation that you might have heard about me personally, has been dealt with in a court of law. I've been cleared of all my charges. Public apologies were made, and the situation has since moved on. So what I found interesting was the PPP playing their nasty games, and we all know the page, which one of the former ministers runs the page, and we all understand that it's time that people start seeing through the nasty vindictiveness that these two parties are accustomed to doing, and there has to be a bigger, more people-centered movement at this point in time. All right. With that said, talking about people-centered movement, I'd just like to quickly touch on this. I think in my world of politics, I think this has to be one of the most amazing pieces of international news that one can find. But I'm going to ask Robbie to bring up, India had an election recently, the largest election in the history of the planet. Okay, over 1 billion people have voted. Like it's like
it took them weeks to count, didn't it?
It took them weeks, long time, and it is really unbelievable. Like what has taken place. But Modi ended up being declared victorious. But what I found most interesting about this article and these results is that he was voted in to a minority government, a minority parliament, meaning the people of India have decided that, okay, we understand that Modi might be the best leader for us, but he cannot have full control. We believe that there have to be other people in parliament representing other groups of people, making sure that no one group, no one party can make all the decisions by themselves. And that is 1 billion people from India.
Yeah. I think what happened with Modi is that his approach, as you may know, was very pro-Hindu. And I think he saw that as his base, as his solid base. But in the world, there's a trend happening. People are more open to information. More information is available. People are seeing how folk live all over the world, and they have a clear sense of what they want for themselves. They also have a better sense of justice in terms of the objectivity of what justice is. Justice isn't just getting what I want and what's fair for me. But it is also remembering that you cannot be silent if unfairness is being done to your neighbor.
Absolutely.
And I was taken aback. I saw a lot of Hindus in India criticizing him because they thought he was too hardline in his approach to the Muslim community. I was really impressed by that. Modi famously, as you know, took over a long-standing mosque and built a temple there and gave the Muslim community another piece of land to build a masjid. And he was criticized for that by the Muslim community. But he was also criticized for it by large sections of the Hindu community. And that impressed me. You see, fairness cuts two ways. And it's not just about ensuring you get yours.
Yeah.
Your duty to society and your humanitarian duty as a whole in life is to make sure that your neighbor gets his too.
Yeah.
Fairness is across the board. And I was impressed with the outcome in India and with the discussion among the Indian population in Delhi and in the other places where they were interviewed.
Definitely.
It was remarkable.
You can see the people on the ground have realized that each of us individually cannot stand alone.
Right.
And we have to make sure that everyone across our society, any level of society, any race, any gender, any economic status, have to be looked at and given a fair opportunity.
And I think this goes back to what you're talking about, because you obviously are seeing yourself as a voice for the voiceless. And in Guyana, a peculiar thing happens. We are so focused on ethnic allegiance, ethnic alliances, and voting along ethnic patterns that we've lost sight of a very central truth in Guyana, that the people at the bottom are not helped by their own party. Their own party takes their vote for granted.
Yeah.
But when you look at the poverty lines, they stay the same.
Yeah.
And I find that if we continue to ignore that and continue to see that the few, the family, the friends are getting very wealthy, but the base that both parties like to pretend is their own, and with justification is their own, we're not seeing an improvement in their station in life, in their role in life, in their level of education, in their access to social institutions. We're not seeing improvements. And that's not acceptable. Not in a society where so much money is flowing around that, as we were discussing earlier, for example, projects can be done, like the Gas to Shore project, with no accounting responsibility, no auditing accountability. That's not right.
That's not right. That's one we're gonna discuss today. Actually, that same project, because there was a very interesting press conference by our Vice President Bara Jagdeo yesterday, I believe, and some very interesting comments were made just in general about some very interesting issues that we have touched on here. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to jump straight into it. We talk about the base of this country. We talk about the people that both these parties stand up and claim to represent and claim to that they belong to. And one of the issues that I found very interesting that we're monitoring and watching across the country is that the traditional sectors that have kept this country alive are being taken for granted now. We're talking about the mining, we're talking about the rice, we're talking about fisheries. We're talking about the industries that have ensured that Guyana was able to keep its head above water, to stay, an independent country, not sink so far into debt that the country can't be run. But as a matter of fact, we're able to almost on their own, private individuals investing in Guyana, keeping this country alive. And if you listen to previous politicians talking from both sides, PPP and PNC, they stand up there and they speak as though these industries belong to Guyana and we will make sure that they flourish. Everybody comes with the promise every election. And one of the things I'd like to point out that was discussed by Dr. Bara Jagdeo in his press conference is actually the mining sector. Now, I'd like to make an interesting comment about this. Before Robbie's going to bring it up in a sec, but before in the press conference, it was amazing to me because how he introduced this issue is he mentioned that he read it in Kaichur News. And he said, I read an article in Kaichur News with these graphs showing that mining is on the decline and gold declarations are on the decline in the country.
But I think he acknowledged it was true.
But that's what the amazing part was. He then went on to say, well, I would like to tell you why gold declarations are on the decline. But what's important about that type of conversation and that wording is that he has admitted that Kaichur News' article was accurate.
Well, that's a nice change because the government has been denying for weeks, if not months, that there's a shortage of foreign exchange in our banking system.
Right.
But I read somewhere today that they've injected $80 million to repair.
We found $80 million, don't worry. But
shortage in foreign exchange.
There you go. Robbie, you can actually bring up both because they're all both intertwined. Here the article says, with Guyana's gold declarations, especially from small and medium-scale miners on the decline, Vice President Jagdeo today warned miners who are refusing to sell their gold to the gold board, in keeping with regulations, that the government will be going after them. So not only is the gold declarations on the decline, but also the government is now going to be going after the miners. These miners who we all know are already struggling. Just bring up quickly because we'll tie both conversations. I'll ask Mr. Jonas' opinion. Also quickly, it says the next headline was Central Bank made US $80 million injection into foreign currency market. The government last week, asked the Bank of Guyana's intervention to address a foreign exchange shortage here following complaints from local commercial banks at the meeting, and as a result, US $80 million released into the monetary system. So as Mr. Jonas pointed out, I'm gonna get into this. This is following the government saying that there is no shortage for months now. I can even probably say years now. And the truth is, the people on the ground, the businesses on the ground have been feeling it. Now, $80 million just by the wave of their magic wand has been injected into the system, meaning they could have done it at any time. And more importantly, which I'd like you to touch on, is that there seems to be no system in place to have this problem addressed regularly.
Well, I'm glad you raised the system, the idea of the system. As you know, I've said before, and I will repeat it on every program I go on. We have to talk about systems and about decentralization of power. Right now, if the government controls parliament and has absolute power, you will have absolute corruption. And it is what we see. You will have the implementation of arbitrary half-baked schemes, such as the student handout and the farmer's handout, which I hope we talk about later. Mm-hmm. But you will also have an arrangement where, because the government knows that it's got all of this free oil money sitting down there, it has the freedom to do what it wants. So it could invest hundreds of millions in a gas to shore project that nobody knows how much it costs or is going to cost, and nobody's seen the plan. It can talk about restarting Amalia Falls, knowing that the opposition has opposed it and may oppose it in the future, but not caring that half of the party representing half of the country is not on board with them. They can talk about building roads that we know fall apart again in a short space of time and spending more money to build the roads again, as we saw on Thomas Lands. I think is the fourth set of roads being built in 4 years.
In 4 years, that's the number. Four times it's been rehabilitated in 4 years, but go on.
If there is no system, then there is no accountability. And this translates back to what you're talking about with the gold and the injection of foreign exchange. Look, our gold industry is a foreign exchange earner. Fiscal responsibility necessitates that the government looks at the finances of the country to ensure as far as possible that there is a balance of income earning foreign exchange and expenditure spending foreign exchange.
Right.
There needs to be that balance. The oil curse occurs when you place all your eggs in the oil basket,
Which we're seeing happen right now.
which we are seeing happen. We have to ensure that our traditional industries, and you name them, agriculture, mining, timber, fishing, we have to implement systems, not arbitrariness, to help them grow, to develop the infrastructure for them to grow. On your last show, we talked about ports of entry in Essequibo to allow exports so that there isn't a difficulty in producing and exporting agricultural produce from there. You have to imagine and develop systems to make things work.
Right.
Now, we read in the papers the other day about two ladies and our man has been charged trying to smuggle, was it 140 ounces of gold or something like that?
I think it's over $100 million in gold, but yes.
Dollars, yeah, but I'm talking about ounces.
Oh yeah, huge sum. Yeah.
Now,
You saw it in the jewelry, right?
right. Here's the thing. If a law is unfair, people will disobey the law. So the law has got to be structured in a way that it is in your interest. You see that it helps the country and it helps you. But it also has to be enforced in a way that is systemic. We go back to systems, not in a way that somebody from the government has to say, wait, y'all start doing this thing. The government is now going to do something about it.
Yeah, reaction.
That is admitting a failure. You are admitting that you have not already implemented a system of good enforcement, good monitoring, good policing to enforce and ensure obedience to a fair law.
Yeah.
If people are going to all that trouble to smuggle gold out of the country, you have to ask yourself why.
Because, and I'd like to point this out to people. I think it's an important fact. You can sell gold in Guyana at the world market price. So how is it that people are still wanting to go as far as breaking the law to get it out of the country?
Yes. And although the gold board traditionally had the monopoly, the government has been licensing other people to buy gold and export. So there is a system. They need to understand where the breakdown is to fix that, rather than sticking your finger in the hole in the dam, hoping that the whole dam doesn't burst and wash you away.
Right.
Yeah, you have to have a system, and so far I'm not seeing one.
Yeah. Interesting conversation, because I'd like to just quickly, because I know we have a big topic coming out about these grants and the lack of systems that are in place for all the money they've been handing out to all of these traditional sectors again. So, but the next headline is the Gas to Shore project. This is another topic that came up at the Vice President's press conference last night. It is showing that Exim Bank has not approved funding. I can ask Robbie to bring it up when he gets a second. Is the Gas to Shore one. But nonetheless, what the headline states is that Exim Bank has not... Exim Bank has not... sorry, my fault, Robbie. My apologies. I could have swore I sent that to you. I'll see if I can send it in a few minutes. Exim Bank has basically said at this point in time that the government is not, they're not giving any funding for the gas to shore, gas to energy project. Okay, so as of right now, the government has no funding and is funding everything all on their own from taxpayers' dollars. There's a budgeted amount of money in our national budget that the government is using for that project. Now, I would like to give a little bit of information that I want to speak on because I know that there is that it's true, and I will explain two reasons why Exim Bank has not so far given money to this project. Now, because this is from information from a year ago. The first one is Exim Bank sent in their auditors and their assessment people over a year ago to look at the progress that has been made on this gas to energy project so far. They have realized that money is not accounted for, that money has been going to the wrong places, that there is no sort of system in place to ensure that this project is on schedule and running in a correct manner. We have seen that two companies from this project already are taking the government to court for $90 million for project overrun costs, which means that there has been no proper management of this project. There has been no proper...
Isn't the project nearly double the original budget?
Already, it started out, if I'm not mistaken, at about $900 million for the whole project to run, and now we are almost at $2 billion US.
Now I got a simple question to that. Because if you start a project, and let's assume you've done your due diligence, some expert has come and said how much it will cost to build, he's looked to see how much it will cost you to buy the gas and how much it will cost you to generate electricity using the gas, so that you can assure the public, as has been done, that electricity will be supplied to the country at half the price it is now being supplied at.
Right.
If that was done at the outset, and now you're 2 times overrun, you've already paid twice what you thought you were going to pay.
Correct.
Are you still going to say to the public that you can supply electricity at half of the price that they are charging now? Because that doesn't resonate in my mind mathematically.
No, rightfully so. And I will tell you, that's the second reason Exim Bank has not touched the project. They have looked at the numbers. They've seen the lack of accountability. They've seen all the overrun costs. They've seen that there's no proper execution of the project. And they have said, there is no way that you can borrow money from us at our interest rate and pay back ExxonMobil for the pipeline that they have paid for and keep electricity under 50%. It's not possible, okay? So what they've said basically is this project is doomed to fail.
Not that it's doomed to fail. They will build it because we got free oil money.
Right.
And they will supply electricity because we got free oil money.
Right.
And they will buy generators and they will change the transmission system because we got free oil money.
Good.
But it will cost a ton of money that belongs to the citizens of Guyana. That is revenue that comes in from oil. And it will be a disaster financially.
I want to just look 2 steps down the road. And when the oil industry, now that we put all our eggs into this basket, I actually want to say something into this basket. We've now become more dependent on the oil and gas. And that's what scares me. And I want to say something that scares me a little bit more. All right. And this is actually more on a personal level. You know what terrifies me? What terrifies me is that this pipeline is controlled by ExxonMobil. This pipeline terrifies me because we know that Exxon has the deal of all deals. We sit down here and we think to ourselves, wow, Exxon has given us the sweet talk. Look how much you're expanding. They must really love Guyana. No, they love the deal that they've gotten. They have decided to put every dollar they have spending and investing in Guyana, not because Guyana is a wonderful country that they're enjoying. They're enjoying the contract that they've been given. Now, that contract is already said and done. The comments on that contract are an entire other conversation. But what it has done is that this pipeline has given Exxon a little bit more control over Guyana. Because all of a sudden now, they decide that they're turning off that pipeline and that FPSO, and we have no more natural gas coming to this power plant. What do we do?
You say that, but I got to step back and ask you a question. If you're afraid of Exxon control of the flow of gas and the control of the pipelines, who would you like to have that control?
Well, at the end of the day, if your argument is PPP versus Exxon, the truth is
not PPP government. I equate the PNC.
This is
agree. Not about PPP.
Agree.
Well, they're in power. Government systems.
Correct, but I will. You have to admit, at the end of the day, I will stand up here and say I'd rather a Guyanese holding the control for that pipeline rather than a foreigner, rather than a foreign company that is only here to take.
The careful lawyer in me is thinking that a Guyanese does not have the money to pay the compensation when it all goes wrong. And at least one thing with Exxon is if you got to sue them, they may have the money to pay you.
Yeah.
You see,
After we were in blackout for years.
One of the huge problems I had with the contract in the first place is that it imposed on Guyana responsibilities if there was an oil spill, if there was a disaster.
Yeah.
Now, what were our institutions going to do if there was an oil spill? The 2 Coast Guard boats that we had were going to go with buckets to mop up oil. It was a ridiculous arrangement that we had made, and that should have been imposed on them immediately. And the first thing we should have done, when we recognized this potential issue that we had, should have been to buy some serious insurance to cater for that eventuality.
Absolutely.
I don't think we've done that yet.
No, we have 2 billion. 2 billion. That's what our insurance covers right now.
Right.
And they can paint it however they want to paint it, but that is all Exxon is on the hook for.
That being said, for me, I would like to know that that infrastructure is under the control of someone, first of all, who has the competence, who has the safety standards and the experience that the Guyana government doesn't have, and who has the pockets to pay the compensation if it goes wrong.
I would like to state something on that. You know, we talk very often about road infrastructure work that's garbage. I see the new Heroes Highway already breaking up. The Luzignan Road, we can show a video just now, but nonetheless, what I'd like to say to that, and this is something I always try to make mention, there are people, there are companies, there are organizations out there that we can pay independently from our oil money to ensure that safety measures are met. There are overlooking companies, well, there's a word for them, but these organizations can come in independent of Exxon and independent of the government to ensure that regulations are met to international standards. These are consultancy companies, whether they are.
Them, but
as a matter of companies like Norway and Canada have offered them already.
That expertise exists here. The engineers here can do it. The thing is, they will not do it if all the power is in the hands of one group.
There you go.
As soon as the other group is allowed to come into the room to scrutinize what's going on, the shenanigans stop.
Yeah.
So we need to invite the other group to come into the room to see what's going on.
Exactly.
Those structures, procurement commission, where the decisions are being made, even a department in the Ministry of Finance, needs to open the door to scrutiny from the PNC. And if PNC is in power, doors need to be open to scrutiny from PPP. If you put them to watch the milk, you have a situation where everybody in Guyana will benefit.
Yeah.
And if that's not done, you will have what is becoming increasingly recognizable as government economics. And I'll tell you what it is.
Government economics. I like
Send an engineer to build a road, to assess how much it will cost to build the road.
Government economics.
The engineer knows that you need so much asphalt, you need to spend so much to lay the base, then he comes back and he says to you, it'll cost $100 to build the road. You then go to your cousin and you say, cousin, bid $100, you'll win. And cousin bids $100. And you say to the cousin, first thing you got to do is give me 20.
Right.
So we now have $80 to build the road. But the cousin got to make his cut. So he says to you, look, I'm not putting this much asphalt on the road. I'm putting this much asphalt on the road. So I beckon 20 for myself as well.
Right.
And you say, that's fine. You know the road is going to break up in 2 years. But you don't mind. You know why? Because in 2 years, you go back to your cousin and say, hey, we need to build a road. That is
As I said in my last show,
that is government.
They might not be good engineers. They might not be capable of managing the country, but they are good businessmen.
And
okay?
If you look
and they're doing business for themselves.
I invite you to look around. Look at the roads that are being built. When the holes develop, as they will develop very soon, see how thick the asphalt layer is.
Robbie, pull up a video for me, man. I got something I want to show Mr. Jonas here. This one is it's the Luzignan Road video. This is the Luzignan Road. Okay, let me actually turn this on for you guys who might not be seeing.
This is an interesting video, Kian.
Yeah, this is Luzignan Road, all right? This video is taken very recently. All right, this is the road opposite the golf course, the Luzignan golf course. Here it is. You can see this is driving in to back to the seawall there, basically north here, driving here, and that is a truck with his tires in the air, impassable road. So
that road was done recently.
Let me tell you about this road. So
I'm trying to remember.
I gotcha. Don't worry. So for all of you that like to follow, the media, like to follow the news, like to follow, all the nice, beautiful events that are going on, that road there, I think it was about a year ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's about a year ago, maybe give or take a couple months. That road was built on an emergency contract basis for healthily over $100 million. I can't remember the exact figure. And it was done in haste to make sure that the road was nice and smooth for the event, the brunch that the First Lady was holding at the Lusignan Golf Course. I know everybody remembers this event. This event was the one that the president came in on his helicopter.
Did you get invited?
No, I didn't get invited. But fair is fair. You could buy a ticket for 50,000 Guyana dollars. Fair is fair. You could buy a ticket. Don't do that. So that road that everyone just... Robbie, play the video one more time while you're talking, man. That road there was built in about maybe 3 days. By taxpayers' dollars. No, way over 100 million. I can find, anybody could go and Google it. This is the Lusignan Road that they quickly capped over to make sure it was smooth for the First Lady's brunch. Okay? And this is the state and the condition of the road now. Impossible, humongous trucks breaking into it, and taxpayers' money gone to nothing, gone to zero, wasted. Like if it didn't exist, like if it's well, it's free money as we like to call it. The government spends it like it's their own for their own personal, motives. And there you have it. So we're talking about a lack of system. Now I want to know, in a proper country, in a country that everybody claims, all these PPP supporters online here are claiming is decent and structured, and the PPP are doing a great job. I want to know who's accountable for that money. I want to know who we can now go to and say, you built a road a year ago for hundreds of millions of dollars. I want to know, and the road is now destroyed into pieces. People can't pass. Who now do we look at and say, you are at fault here. You spent wrong money. You built a poor road. And I want to know how taxpayers can have accountability for their dollars.
So you go back to what system exists. Mm-hmm. And the system that exists is the Procurement Commission, which the majority of members are appointed by the government in various manifestations, and therefore have said before in terms of other contracts, and will say if this one is challenged, maybe there were shortcuts that shouldn't have been taken, but it's done, too bad, let's move on. Right. You see, ordinarily with a contract, you should have a bidding process. Mm-hmm. But there are exceptions that are introduced in the legislation, which I think are abused. And one of the exceptions is an emergency. If you got an emergency, right, you can bypass the procurement process, inviting bidders and looking at the best evaluated bid and all of that. And you could single-handedly just say, Kian, I appoint you, you build the road, cousin. So,
cousin Kian.
So when that happens, there are no guidelines, there are no safety measures to ensure fairness, ensure a good price, that kind of thing. You sole source it. And then you get this. Now, the thing is, I find it hard to conceive a situation where there was an emergency to build this road.
There was a brunch. What's wrong?
Well, I guess people were hungry.
Jeez, people like to have fun, okay?
But if the opposition had a say and actually had the say in these institutions, so if we decentralize power away from the government so that the opposition, whichever party is in opposition, has the swing, it wouldn't happen. Because that contract would go to them and they would look at it and they'd say, where's the emergency? Right. But if it's a government-controlled institution, then they will agree that brunch is an emergency.
There you go.
And we see that over and over and over.
You're bringing me into a hot topic right now, something I need to bring up with you, okay? Something that irks my soul. At least once a day it crosses my mind. A contract was given out in 2020 when the government first got into power. When they first got sworn in. It's probably one of the first contracts. It is a contract, an emergency contract for in and around 30 to 50 million US dollars that was given to a sole provider, a sole source provider, or again on the emergency platform for EID cards. Now this was a contract that I know up to now nobody has seen no ID cards. But this contract was given to one person, sole sourced on an emergency basis for millions of US dollars. Up to now, we ain't seen nothing, none of it. So I want to ask you right now, is that a situation? How would we how can one remedy that situation? How, you tell me, you're in the hot seat right now, Mr. Jonas. You holding a minority government. You got your say in money being spent. What are we doing about this scenario?
You giving me a swing vote?
I give you a swing vote.
Okay. Well, first of all, the rules would not allow the institution, the ministry that is awarding the contract, to make the decision that there's an emergency. You see, there's no doubt an emergency can come up, and you mustn't spend 3 weeks if the sea coming over the seawall because the seawall broke. You mustn't spend 3 weeks asking bidders to submit bids.
There are situations.
There are emergencies.
Yeah.
So it's not that the legal requirements are wrong, but the government must not be the institution to decide that there's an emergency.
Agreed.
If there's an emergency, it must go to the commission, and the commission must be majority opposition. Mm-hmm. And the commission will say, look, the sea coming over the seawall, this is an emergency, sole source. Mm-hmm. But when you sole source, you come back to us and you tell us who got the contract. You tell us how much,
what basis,
how much they are being paid, so that we can then, after we fix our emergency, we can then do our own maths and do our own checks to see that the job is done well and to see that a fair price was obtained. And you didn't abuse this discretion that we're giving you because it's an emergency.
Yeah.
None of that happens. And that's what you saw with the ID cards that we're still waiting for. Emergency, sole source.
Elections a year from now.
Where are the ID cards?
Yeah.
Good. Now, I want to say this as well, because I actually support the government's move to introduce an ID card system. But I support that as part of a larger scheme of creating a system that we all live in society and we all meet our obligations and we all benefit from the institutions that I think the free oil money can be given us. Mm. So there needs to be a structure that introduces Guyanese all over into the banking system, into the NIS system, into the systems that we know are so important for anybody to have a decent standard of living and to have access to money, access to the wherewithal to look after his children and her children and to go through life. So an ID card and registration as a citizen and being identified as a Guyana citizen living in Guyana and therefore entitled to the tax breaks and the other breaks that I think should be associated with Guyanese citizenship. That necessitates a card that should be your magic card. It should be your get out of jail. It should be your pass, go, and get $200 card.
Right.
And to do that, you need a system that identifies you not just as Guyanese, but identifies you as working, your age, your gender, where you're from. So what you're entitled to in terms of free education, free medical, free health, free social services that identifies you because you are Guyanese. Mm-hmm. I support that, but I want to discuss it in a bit more carefully, a bit more leisurely, in some more detail as to why that's important. But it should not be done from a starting point that there's an emergency unless sole source a contract.
Right.
That is a breakdown of the very system that we're trying to say we need systems, and there is broken.
Of course.
Already.
No, I love it. You're exactly on point with how these systems need to be implemented for these types of upgrades. And like you said, it's something that, we can agree with. And I think that's an important fact. I think that nobody here is saying, no, we disagree with that move, right? No, just like in any other situation, in fixing roads, in cheaper electricity, we're not saying no to these things. They just need to be done systematically and with accountability and transparency behind
Definitely.
it. That's all it is. And I think that's where people tend to get confused. They think that, we're typical opposition sitting down here saying, no, we go in and throw the whole thing like Amelia Falls. No, we're not. But
I like the Amelia Falls example because if the opposition had a say from the outset, they either would have been convinced that Amelia Falls was a good idea, so that when they took over in 2015, it would have continued seamlessly, or they would have persuaded the government and used their majority in the institutions to say, we're not endorsing that it cannot happen.
Right.
So we wouldn't have lost the amount, the billions that have been spent starting Amalia Falls in a system that finished well. I don't know where that road is now. Hope it doesn't look like Lusignan.
I hope not.
So, so we need that continuity of economic policies, of economic programs, and that will only happen if both large parties are on board.
And in the decision-making process. Yes. And the only way to do that is to stop a majority from occurring. You listen, it's natural. It's natural. If somebody's given all the power, they will use all the power.
Too bad for you.
It's it's just natural. It's just what happens and what occurs. Now, if you can ensure, just by making sure that in Parliament, just by ensuring that there has to be some sort of consultation in any decision process, then all of this changes, the entire dynamic changes. And I'd like to state, every time we say this, there's always these wonderful comments that come in and say, we tried it with AFC, we tried it with Degars, we've been there down that road.
Yeah, look what we're trying now.
Look what we're trying now. I'd like to make a statement to that. If there is one thing, and I always say this, Tim and I, we were there from the beginning of this party. He had his meeting, and then I quickly joined as soon as they got the launching of the party. I was there, etc. And it all stemmed from the failures of the AFC. I think this birthed ANUG, where everybody sat down and said, wow, they had the opportunity to do the right thing and they failed.
Well, let me tell you, I can confirm that. Mm-hmm. We called a group together, Ralph Ramkaran, Henry Jeffrey, a couple other people with gravitas, people who have the experience, who have the knowledge, who are experts in their own field, who recognized the need for transparency in systems, and that you do not get transparency if the winner takes all by a government holding majority in Parliament. And AFC had been our hope. Mm-hmm. It had been my hope. And when it was clear that AFC had not drawn that line in the sand to stop the excesses of the PNC started firing PPP folk from all the institutions, putting in their own folk. When we saw that the PNC excesses were not being restrained by the AFC, and the AFC were not keeping their manifesto promises as to constitutional reform and transparency, we wrote a letter to the AFC. And we said to the AFC, if you do not honor your campaign promises, if you do not do the right thing and stop the excesses of the PNC government, we will take our concerns directly to the people. And when AFC ignored us, as they would, they were in power and they expected to be in power forever. When they ignored us, that is what birthed ANOG. That is why we came on board. We came on board because of the betrayal of AFC, of the people that were supporting it. The swing voters, the independents, the people who recognize the harm in the two parties. Yep. And we decided we were going to do what AFC should have done in the first place. It was a poor wicket because AFC spoiled that wicket. But I don't think it's a poor wicket anymore. I think people are seeing the problem and seeing where a solution can lie.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, just to dumb that down, just so people really understand, ANUG will not do what AFC did. We will never join PPP or PNC, okay? APNU, any of the large organizations. Because at the end of the day, we believe that there has to be a minority government, there has to be a balance in the middle, there has to be a position of forcing everyone to consult with each other. Because
and here's the thing, if that succeeds, we can be irrelevant. They don't need us.
That's right.
Because the PPP and the PNC can agree they're going to build Amalia Falls. They don't have to ask us. Yep. They will have 60 or 62 of the 65 seats in Parliament. They don't have to ask us anything. Yep. And what will happen from that is that the PPP constituents and the PNC constituents will both be represented in that discussion, and both interests will be reflected.
Absolutely.
That is what we want. At long last, there will be one Guyana.
Yeah. Because majority rules. Democratic principles dictate that majority rules. So at the end of the day, if 45% go to PPP and 45% go to PNC, then guess what? Majority of this country want those two organizations to make the decisions.
And 90% will be represented in the decision that the two of them make.
There you go. Simple as that.
They will have to sit down with their enemy. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, and this is what I want to make clear. I know people from both parties, and there are incompetents and there are racists in both parties. But there are also good people, well-intentioned people, and people with integrity in both parties. And if we make those people sit down, they will reach an end result that represents 90% of this population. And that's all we need.
Yep. Yep. That is all we need. And the key to all of this, is stopping the blame game. Because that is, to me, what everyone in this country, all the comments, as you continue to read, as you continue to watch what all these PPP and PNC mouthpieces say, as they're going back and forth and they lies and they slander and they think what they don't want, all they're capable of doing is pointing the finger at the other side. Nobody stops for a second and say, well, what are we doing wrong? And that is what needs to change. That accountability process to say, no, if the Gas to Shore project fails, you guys made that decision together, and that is what has occurred. So the people of the country now get to determine whether or not the government are in any way, shape, or form working towards the betterment of Guyana or to the betterment of themselves.
Right now, we don't know if Amalia Falls would have been a success or not.
Yeah.
Because it was done in a high-handed, unilateral way by one party. The other party was not involved in the decision, and they cut the string as soon as they had the power to cut the string.
That's right.
We don't know if it would have worked, but we do know Guyanese taxpayers' money has gone down the drain in yet another failed project.
There we go.
Was the PNC consulted in the Skeldon estate? Was the PNC consulted in the fiber optics? Is the PNC now being consulted in Gas to Shore? If the PNC comes into power in the next election, what is going to happen to all of those projects? Well, some of them have failed. Most of them have failed already. But the ones that are struggling on, what will happen to them? Will they cut the string again because they were not consulted in the first place?
I mean, look at the gas to energy project.
This is what we are facing in the country. No fiscal responsibility, because as long as I have all the power, I can make all the decisions. Don't mind that it's 2 times over budget, and don't mind I'm making promises I know I can't keep. I have the power.
And if there's one thing we've learned is that PNC will go in there and do the same thing. They're no different. As far as I can't keep telling people PNC and PPP are identical parties. They're the exact same thing. They pretend to be different, but they're no different. All right, we've both seen, they're the only 2 parties that have run this country since its independence. And guess what? We are now still behind time, still arguing over nonsense, still watching roads break up, still watching money being stolen and wasted. We're back to square one. At the end of the day, I do want to bring up another topic very quickly. I know we got a few minutes actually. I want to bring up these COVID cash grants. I think it lends back to your conversation of lack of system, because what we're watching now, Tim, is you said, I continuously monitor, I continuously try to talk to people on the ground. And what you're seeing now is this huge disconnect that's still constantly occurring, in which the economic levels, the economic classes in this country are widening. The poor are getting poorer, much poorer. Salaries are not raising. Cost of living is going through the roof. We're all feeling it. And then we're watching this other group of people that are bringing in Lamborghinis, bringing in, getting these huge houses, these huge mansions, building these humongous hotels and building, and everybody's kind of going, but the average Guyanese is suffering. How is it that there's one group of people that are shooting away and making all of this money? Now, I do want to bring up a topic that I think will lend to the conversation as well. I have a very big concern, and I want to say this to the camera, and I want all of you to listen to it very carefully. I have a brewing issue that I'm calling from now. The teachers have been on strike for about 2 months plus at this point in time, on and off. And at this given moment, my worry is that these teachers have already found other sources of income, have already found other jobs, and I don't know who is coming back to work to educate our children for the future. We've already been in a shortage of teachers in this country up to this point. Now that they are being paid pittances, now that they can go and get a job in any corporate structure, be paid $200,000-$300,000 to just sit behind a desk and do clerical work. My question is, what percentage of teachers are even coming back to the classrooms when this is all said and done? And I think this is a worrying situation that all Guyanese need to be paying attention to. Our children's futures depend on it.
You know, that's a really important point. You see, we talk about unemployment in Guyana, and if you look at unemployment carefully, what you realize is that there actually is very little unemployment at the white collar level. Because the education system has failed us, most Guyanese do not qualify for a job that requires a level of education that is sound and maybe at a tertiary level. The teachers fit that bill. They are educated, many of them at tertiary level, and I believe they are therefore marketable on the job market in Guyana. Mm-hmm. Now, if your fear is realized and those teachers being out of job begin to find jobs elsewhere in offices throughout Guyana, high clerks, supervisor level, in any of the banks, the insurance companies, they will be making more money than a teacher makes. Mm-hmm. They will not go back to teaching. Now, a lot of teachers will tell you, and it's true, the reason they are teachers is because they are conscientious and they love what they do. They're proud of what they do. And you have to admire them. Both of my parents were teachers. If you leave that and you get a better paying job, you could love it as much as you want to love it. It's hard to go back for a less paying job, more poorly paying job. And I think given that we've had a shortage of teachers, and given quite frankly, and I'm sorry to say this, but it's true, that the quality of teachers in Guyana is not what it was 20 and 30 years ago already. If we start losing them, and remember in a job market, you won't lose the worst, you will lose the best.
That's right. Like our nurses. Yeah.
Our Ministry of Education needs to be very concerned. I hope that this doesn't materialize. I hope that they resolve the problem and they get their increase that they deserve.
Yeah.
It is unconscionable what we pay them, and it is unconscionable that we award contracts for hundreds of millions of dollars for Luzignan Road, and we can't pay our teachers a little bit more money and our pensioners a little bit more. It's unconscionable.
Yeah.
I hope they get what they deserve and get back into the classroom so that they can teach our children.
Absolutely. On that note, I'd like to invite you back here next week because we're out of time. I'd like to invite you back here next week because I do want to discuss with you some interesting aspects of the cash grants that were given out, and again, some connections that have been made again to lack of accountability and some systems that are required in order to get this.
Well, I'm glad you gave me warning. Let me tell you all, when I sit down here, Kian doesn't warn me what's going to happen. So I come and I sit and he says, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. And I have to struggle to catch up. Now that I have fair warning from Kian, what I promise I will do is next week when he talks about the cash grant, I will give you my opinion, first of all, of what it should be meant to achieve, why it has failed to achieve that, what the problems are, and most importantly, I'm going to propose a solution that I think will better meet the needs and more cheaply and more efficiently with a system. Please remember, the mantra is always a system that decentralizes arbitrary power from the government, so you don't see ministers with white envelopes handing out money and shaking hands and getting smiles for photographs. Hopefully we can talk about that next week, and I hope you will hear the proposed solution and think about it, talk about it with your family, and see if maybe it's not a better approach than white envelopes full of money, some being stolen in Berbice. I remember some NDC money was stolen that was lodged
it
there.
being unevenly distributed. Some farmers getting
twice, some people get here we are again. Systems.
All right. On that note, I have to, at the end of every show, I say the same thing. I think we are at 97 deaths for the year already on the roads. We're in June. We're at the beginning of June.
I think another show we have to talk about in terms of solutions is the road crisis. Anybody who drives in Guyana sees that the traffic is inefficient, the traffic is poor, the traffic piles up, the movement of traffic is not good, and there is road rage and there's frustration and there's no monitoring.
Yeah.
But there are solutions. Yeah. Maybe we can talk about that another time.
Somebody has to have this conversation because this cannot continue the way we're going. So guys, on that note, please be very careful out there. It's a nice weekend. I think we're expecting we're still in rainy season, I guess. Guys, visibility is poor, signage, there's big piles of sand on the road, there's construction everywhere. There are, not bright enough crosswalks. Please be careful. There are these little scooters riding around, the electric ones. There are children on the roads because they're not in school. Jesus, I have to bring that up. There are so many children begging on the road. It is disgusting. They are everywhere begging on the road. What is going on in this country?
One of the things we will talk about next week, if we're talking about the cash handouts, hopefully will be a resolution of that specific problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, on that note, thank you for joining us here. Please be safe out there. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will be back here next Friday. Take care.